Our story takes place in the north of what is presently the nation of Nigeria. According to legend, the Hausa Bakwai, the 7 kingdoms of Daura, Biram, Gobir, Kano, Katsina, Rano, and Zazao came into being through a great ruler, Bawa, and his 6 sons. Bawa was himself the son of a mythical figure who emigrated from Baghdad and slew a great serpent. But that is a story for another time. This story instead is of the 7 Hausa states and how they arrived at a monumental upheaval in 1804, one in which their rulers were deposed and the kingdoms were united into one nation under Usman dan Fodio. This is the road to the Sokoto Caliphate. 1,000 years ago, long before Islam was introduced to the region, the Hausa predominantly followed a traditional belief system, Bori. Public rituals in service of these beliefs were commonplace, enabling certain practitioners to be possessed by spirits, otherwise known as Iskoki, Aljanu, or Jinn. These unseen spirits of the world corresponded with all manner of things living and non-living, and their placation was paramount for human flourishing. Such was the way of things until the latter half of the 1300s, when Wangarawa clerics and merchants of the Mali Empire made their way to Hausaland, serving as the initial introduction of Islam. While the new religion attracted followers among the wealthy, it also saw great resistance from many staunch Buri acolytes. Islam's presence in the region was solidified circa 1493 by the arrival of Sheikh Mohammed al-Maghili from what is today Algeria. He gifted Kano's then ruler, Saki Rumfa, with the obligation of princes, written instructions on statecraft that led to Hausaland's combination of Islam and Buri in a syncretic belief system. Another brief 100 years later, 1591 saw the collapse of the Songhai Empire, a dominant power in West Africa of the time. The defunct empire's trade routes provided ample opportunity for the city-states of Katsina and Kano to rise to prominence, the two becoming renowned in the trans-Saharan trade as centers of learning and commerce. In this era, the Hausa nations had grown in population and power. This increased urbanization was managed through institutional roles in the Sarauta system. These roles were held by the Sarakuna, traditional kings such as Sakin Kofa, Sakin Kaswa, Magajin Gari. They and many more operated under the directives of each kingdom's supreme leader, Sakin Kasa. Despite the authority granted to them, most still had to rely on the custodians of Buri to effectively govern the people. Society was divided into 2 classes, Masu Sarauta and Talakawa. On one hand, the rulers faced with the challenge of nation building. On the other, the subjects, who were the very fuel for this growth. As is common through human history, the quest for absolutism in power derailed many from maintaining accountable leadership. And, as is noted in the Kano Chronicle, by the 1730s, Saki Kumbari collected jizya in Kano and made even the Malams pay. There was so much disturbance that the Arabs left the town and went to Katsina, and most of the poorer people fled the country. Worse still, the Masu Sarauta showed brazen disregard for Islamic Sharia that was by this time well established. In one such recorded incident, the sons of Sakin Katsina Tsagarana had killed a man following a quarrel. Outraged citizens demanded that the princes be executed, as per the customs of the day. Yet the Saki refused that such punishment be meted out on his children. A major schism was only averted when a fatwa was issued by a Muslim cleric in Yantodo. The verdict advocated for a diya, a payment in place of the deceased. At the turn of the 19th century, the growing discontent in Hausaland was coming to a head. Shehu Usman dan Fodio, an imam who preached for reform and a strong adherence to Sharia, was around the age of 50 and held a large public sway. This was such that he had previously even been granted 5 privileges by Sakin Gobir Bawa, These were: allow me to call people to God in your land. Do not stop anyone who intends to respond to my call. Treat with respect all who wear a turban. Free all political prisoners. Do not burden the people with excessive taxes. This was disrupted with Bawa's death. His successor, Saki Nafata, rescinded this agreement, and instead, Dan Fodio alone was allowed to preach in Gobir, with all others being prohibited. Citizens who converted to Islam were to revert to their earlier religious practices. There was to be no further conversion of the people of the kingdom to Islam. Many in Hausaland were already unhappy with the government, and Dan Fodio's widely disseminated writings stoked the flames of rebellion, drawing supporters against the autocrats and their un-Islamic practices. By 1804, relations in Gobir had soured such that Dan Fodio and his followers withdrew from Degel, amidst increasing conflict with Nafata's successor, Sakin Yunfa. Shehu and his supporters embarked on a legendary hijrah, relocating to Gudu, where they began to form an autonomous community. This marked the beginning of a militant uprising that would soon grow to outright jihad. Dan Fodio's forces were primarily led by his eldest son, Muhammad Bello, and Dan Fodio's brother, Abdullahi Fodio, with many notable allies such as Ali Jado, Malam Umar Dalaji, and Bubayero. The jihad proper lasted 4 years and featured such prominent battles as the Battle of Tafkeen Quarter. Was the first major battle of the jihad in June of 1804 and saw Abdullahi Fodio and Muhammad Bello, along with Ali Jado, lead the outnumbered Muslim army to victory against the Gobir cavalry. The Battle of Sun Tua took place in December of 1804 at the town of Sun Tua, close to Alakawa. Dan Fodio's forces faced a crushing defeat in a devastating counterattack by a combined Gobir and Tuareg force. Possibly up to 2,000 of Shehu's soldiers were killed, 200 of whom were Hufaz. And so processed Dan Fodio's jihad. 1807 saw the capture of Kano, perhaps Hausaland's most powerful kingdom of the time. In that same year, the jihadists also overcame Katsina and Daura, all but ensuring victory. Even Gobir would later fall in 1808, allowing Dan Fodio's consolidation of power and laying the foundations for a new regime. The Sokoto Caliphate. The position of Caliph was held by Usman Dan Fodio, with him simply being referred to as Amir al-Mu'minin, Commander of the Faithful. When Dan Fodio passed away some years later, succession rites were conducted by an electoral college known as the Council of Surah, and the seat was appointed to Muhammad Bello on the 20th of April 1817. It was Bello that first used the title Sultan of Sokoto. The successive sultans reigned in the region for generations, that is, until the British conquest of Hausaland in 1903, just 1 century later. Soon after, Hausaland, as part of Britain's Northern Nigeria Protectorate, would be united with the Southern Protectorate to form the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria on January 1st of 1914. Such is the ever-shifting nature of our world. What may have become of the Sokoto Caliphate were it not for the British invasion? Was the natural development of a nation shifted by outside forces, or were those outside forces themselves part of the natural development? Let us not forget that the Sokoto Caliphate, like many fearsome nations, established a massive slave trade. Is it human nature to not recognize our own suffering in the other? Thank you for sitting with us by this window into the past. Hopefully you've learned something new and will peer once again into the Naijanomicon for another story of Nigeria.